a little while to open myself back up to seeing one-on-one clients and, open myself back up to be in that role of like, you know, uh, going through someone's health information, like helping them situate and balance out their health. But, I did really feel that there was a need for it in the community. I was getting messages from people like at the beginning of the year. So now that that's an option, it seems like, my goal is essentially for people to like come in and to just like when they leave our container, not need me anymore. Like the goal is to just give you the resources, like give you the education to be able to navigate your health and balance it out yourself. So I was doing these lives, once a month, and I pretty much decided that I'm just going to start doing them as like a group health coaching because I feel like, you know, it feels like people can't, not everyone is able to like come to the health coaching. Not everyone is able to like pay that price for it. So just kind of giving this resource to everyone in the apothecary feels right to me. In the future, what I'll likely do just to as this gets bigger, as more people start coming, I'll probably just make the chat for paid subscribers so that like I'm not getting like flooded with a ton of stuff to talk about each time. But um yeah, I just think like there's a lot of overlap in what I see in my skin consultations and my health consultations. So I think it just makes sense to kind of talk about things in general for everyone. And if you need extra support, if you need more things, then that's when the container can kind of come in handy for people since yeah, I just don't have like a lot of availability. Also like exciting news, I'm taking on a new freelance position, so I won't be it's not that I won't be as present on here. This is obviously my main vibe. You guys are, my most important thing, but it definitely means that I need things a lot more streamlined and a lot more like systematic. Um so yeah, so what I did end up doing on that note is I redid my homepage. There's a link in the post I sent recently to the homepage, and you can check that out. I organized it kind of in this more like editorial chic vibe. It's still got the essence of a Black Women's Apothecary, but I just wanted it to be more like, this is where you can find stuff about life. This is where you can find stuff about the body. This is where you can find skincare and beauty stuff. And I just like really wanted it to be organized. And then I also excitingly finally have a logo that isn't just a picture of me. Even though we love that, like that was OG Apothecary circa 2024. Like actually did that photo shoot in like 2022. So like it was like it carried me a very long way. Like we're in 2026 and I've been using those photos. So that was great, but it just kind of felt like I needed to give the apothecary a bit more of like an identity that wasn't necessarily me. Like I am obviously the writer creator here, but there's so much more within the apothecary than just me. And I wanted it to kind of have the essence of that. So if you haven't checked out the homepage, check out the homepage. It's way more organized. It's way more, I don't know, cute. Like I love it. I'm obsessed. I feel like it's really interesting when you like switch from like a linear career to like a creative career because you really do follow all of your creative impulses. Like it's genuinely a practice to each, each time you get, a creative insight. Sorry, my for some reason my this is weird. Yeah, when you do get a creative insight, it just feels like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go do that. Like it doesn't feel like you have to really think about it. It doesn't feel like, there's a lot that goes into it other than like the execution of it. And that's really, really exciting. Um, On that note, I actually have had a lot of questions lately in my inbox about, like, switching from a more, like, linear healthcare career to a more, um, like, creative, medical writing kind of focused career. It's interesting, like, I wasn't really getting a lot of those messages until, like, literally this last month. I feel like I've gotten, like, so many in my inbox, like, a couple of people in a session, so I'm actually I've been building out, like, a career series, which generally just works for people in general. If you're switching careers, this is essentially the model that I used, to leave my career in healthcare and build this career that you see now, which is definitely more creative. Like, I would call myself a content creator, I would call myself a writer, I would call myself consultant. Like, a lot of what I do now is consulting and writing. So, I was able to kinda etch that out for myself, and it's constantly growing. I mean, I have some news that I'll probably share. I don't know when I'll share it because I don't know when it goes public, but probably, like, midsummer that I'll share, but, that's kind of a development of my shift in careers. So, I am thinking about maybe doing, like, a more specific post on, like, what it takes to kind of leave a really linear path and what it takes to really leave a linear career because it can be really scary. Like, I was super scared. I mean, I feel like you guys see me now and it's like, you know, a year and a half after I left. So now I'm a bit more in my mode, like I'm a bit more in my right brain. But when I first started, I mean, I was coming out of like I was coming out of like being a doctor, like being on that like very traditional, like very set path that was like, okay, if you're gonna go here, these are the steps to do it, you know? So I do remember being really afraid. I do remember being very, uncomfortable and just like, what am I doing? Like, I feel like when you're someone who's like very aware and you're also someone who's like super authentic, you make decisions a lot of the time that can send your nervous system into overload because you're just like, yo, like, this isn't right for me anymore. So I'm going to leave. And sometimes that's really scary. And other times you have the resources to do it. And I think that when it comes to leaving something that's very linear and moving to something that's more creative, it really does come down to having a plan, like having a, a capacity, honestly. And I think creating a plan, creating kind of this like North Star does give you that sort of capacity a little bit more. So, career posts, those are coming out once a month throughout the summer, and then I might write another post separately on how to, like, leave a linear career path, just because 'cause I've been getting questions about that a lot. Okay, so, my goal today is to take us through and talk about cortisol, like cortisol imbalances, what they look like, what they do to you, all the ins and outs of the science of it. Like, essentially, the post I wrote earlier this week, we're just gonna like go into that, and you guys can like ask your questions that you have on them. If you have like other health questions, I'm also opening to answering those. Um, I'm gonna try to keep my part of this short so that there's room within it and at the end for you to ask questions because, yeah, I want this to kind of be more interactive. Like, I want you guys to feel like your doctor didn't answer this question, so you can come to Dr. Alysia and you can ask her, Like, or you just got diagnosed with this, like, you don't know what that means, like, where to even start? Like, stuff like that. Like, I want this to be really, like, an environment where you feel like your needs, your concerns can be heard, and you can also receive, like, education and someone who can explain things to you and has the time to explain them to you, and you don't necessarily just have to rely on whatever practitioners you're seeing that are seeing you for, like, 15 minutes. Like, trying to, like, bridge some of that gap. Um, okay, so Are there any questions about anything that I said before I get into cortisol? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Feel free to just post questions throughout the talk, and I can always, like, answer them, scroll back up and answer them later. Um, we'll see how it works, but it's definitely open for you to post questions. Okay, so cortisol. I feel like this is like a buzzword because over the last like year or year and a half, everyone has gotten obsessed with the nervous system. And, you know, I think that so much of how social media works is actually just really beneficial for people because it starts to get you thinking about things that maybe you wouldn't have. But the thing that social media doesn't do is it'll maybe give you something, right? Like nervous system. And then it's like, you need to focus on that, but it doesn't tell you, like, how, it doesn't tell you what that means, it doesn't tell you, the ins and outs of that and, like, how you even recognize if that's something that you're dealing with, like, it doesn't tell you any of that, and so I think that, there's always, like, a good and a bad to, like, technology, and I think that is one of the things that I find is kind of annoying because it's just like, people will be like, "Yeah, I've heard so much about cortisol, but I have no clue what to do with that or where to start." And so, where to start, I would say, is like if you've not kind of had a foundational understanding of what it means, my post from this month does a really good job of explaining that. It goes through the mechanisms, it goes through like scientifically what it means, but it also, what is that, a med? um, but it also goes through like what that means for you and some different ways that you can start to kind of manage it. So, cortisol itself is actually a hormone. It's literally released by the body when your system goes into nervous system fight or flight. So, your nervous system has two places that it likes to be. We talk about this a lot. There's argument that there's three, but in the body, physiologically, there's two. So, the first one is going to be that rest and digest. The second one is gonna be fight or flight. Fight or flight is what is gonna release this cortisol into the system. It is a product of the adrenals. Essentially, your adrenals are your, like, stress organ. They're releasing ACTH, which is not something you guys need to know, but essentially that signals to the body, "Let's release this cortisol." So, the cortisol that is being released is essentially an effect of this nervous system heightening. It's not in itself bad. Like, cortisol has a job to do in the body. Um it's not inherently a bad hormone. It's not inherently a bad thing to have circulating. When you start getting problems is when cortisol is elevated and when it's elevated for prolonged periods of time. So, the best way to kind of explain this difference is you have cortisol elevation that happens when you're like physiologically stressed. Like you're working out, you're lifting weights, you're really, going hard or you're running, something like that. But the key to when we have those like short bursts of increased kind of nervous system response is that we want to also bring ourselves down from those. Because what happens is when we have high levels of cortisol and like high nervous system for a long period of time, it starts to signal to the body that there's some sort of chronic stressor. And that's where cortisol imbalances start. That's where like all of this talk of like nervous system dysregulation, like all of this talk is essentially not just cortisol itself. Cortisol itself is neutral. It's the act of having high cortisol for long periods of time. And that's what leads to the issues that you start to see with cortisol. Okay. So that essentially is like the start of it. Um, so the next part of that is that when you have these like elevated cortisol situations, i.e., you have a nervous system that's been in a stressed out state for a long period of time, your adrenals can get tired. Like, if you think about it, when we were, were made, human beings were made, our adrenals were meant to respond to short term stress. They're meant to respond to a lion chasing us, like bursts of cortisol, uh, our morning waking, bursts of cortisol. Uh, you know, we haven't eaten lunch, bursts of cortisol. Like it's meant to be that. And when you have experiences, which most of us do, like chronic stress is essentially chronic cortisol. Like that is just how the body physiologically relates to stress. Like it is going to release this cortisol. So when you have periods where you have this prolonged cortisol release, your body isn't built to respond to it. So essentially what can happen is you can have things that start to mimic no cortisol, like essentially you're very tired, it's hard to like get out of bed, it's hard to like motivate yourself to follow your body signals. Maybe you like start missing meals because you're just like too tired to cook. You're like, waking up in the morning, you're always tired, you're always needing to like sleep in, press the snooze button, whatever. Like that is basically what can happen as cortisol stays elevated for long periods of time. Now, there's tons of angles that we can go into when it comes to cortisol. Like you can talk about uh allosteric load when it comes to like childhood trauma, which essentially is just like, you know, each of us has a load of cortisol that we can handle. Everyone's cortisol parameter is essentially different. There's an argument that says that people who have more childhood trauma essentially are already working at an elevated cortisol. Um, and i.e. would have maybe like a lower sensitivity to heightened cortisol, prolonged heightened cortisol. There's an argument for that. Okay, I got a question. Could this also manifest as functional freeze? Yes. So when we talk about cortisol, it's a little bit different than when we talk about like the nervous system itself. Like when we're talking about cortisol, we're talking about the sympathetic nervous system. Uh, and that's a physiologic experience. Whereas when we talk about like the nervous system and we're just talking about like freeze, fawn, fight or flight, those different things, within the nervous system context, there's different responses that you can have with your nervous system. But that doesn't change what expression is happening with cortisol. So, functional freeze, essentially you have a heightened cortisol, but your nervous system is heightened, but at the same time you're not like moving in that same way that you're heightened. So it's different when you're talking about like behavioral nervous system responses and you're talking about physiologic nervous system responses. So you kind of have to like separate the two, which can get confusing. I feel like most of the time behavioral nervous system responses, you talk to like a therapist for like, someone who's going to help you with like um, more like behavioral things. Whereas like when you talk about like health and what's going on physiologically in the body, like cortisol imbalances and things like that, you're more so speaking to someone who's going to be like more in the body. Like we're not necessarily talking about what your behavior might be in response to that, if that makes sense. Even though some of the symptoms can influence the behavior. So you kind of just have to like separate them. Um, which if it starts to get too confusing, this is why we have skin consultations. But yeah, this is why we have consultations and this is why we have people who like specialize in this stuff because it can get a little bit confusing. But the goal of this is to kind of like bridge your understanding of it. So if you don't have something super severe or whatever, you're able to understand that on your own. Okay. My reason for talking about cortisol in general right now is that for the past, like, 3 months that I've been doing my skin consultations, most of the people I've seen have had some iteration of a cortisol imbalance. It's interesting because when I went into it, I I genuinely thought that was gonna be, like, the lowest of the things that I was seeing, and then it ended up being, like most people that I was seeing, were having cortisol imbalances. And the thing about that is, you know, the skin is think of it as like a signaler. Like it's not really individually doing a lot on its own. It's just signaling what's going on under the surface. And so is your hair and so is, different physical features of your body. Like they're just signals essentially. And so when you have what looks like elevated cortisol, you can get different bodily signals. And one of them is that you get a higher conversion into androgens, essentially within the sex hormones. So you're creating more androgens. Androgens essentially are like testosterone and testosterone precursors like DHEA, things like that. You're making more of that and you're making more like DHT. So like you're making more androgen like things. And when we make more androgen-like things to a level that is higher than our, like, normal level, so this is usually essentially in women, you see, obviously, like, androgen high skin conditions or, like, acne and things like that, and that's because of this cortisol connection. When you have high cortisol, that cortisol shunts more into these mechanisms. And that's actually, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about when it comes down to that, but like that also relates to like hair loss, the androgen kind of picture. Um, yeah. So, the one way to kind of see the crazy effects of cortisol, like when I was in med school, this was one of the scariest conditions I've ever seen in my life is when people are put on essentially like cortisol medications. They're not technically cortisol medications, like they're called steroids, right? And so things like prednisone and precursors of that, you see something that is really, really scary called Cushing syndrome, and I actually included an image of that in my post on cortisol because it's not everyone is gonna look this way, it's not that extreme, like, this is obviously, like, the most extreme expression of high cortisol you can see, but when you start to, like, scale it back and you start to just be like, "Oh, like, if this is the highest, then there's a range of how this can look." And so some of the things that you see are, like, weight that stays around the belly, you see the acne, you see, like, a picture of someone who maybe has some metabolic issues, like glucose that starts to be an issue. We're not able to release insulin to get our glucose down fast enough. You start to see maybe someone who used to be fine, now is in the prediabetes range. Like, these are all things that cortisol can do. Okay. So, with that, there is also something called pregnenolone steal, which not really important for you guys to know, but essentially the idea is that sex hormones get shunted and you start losing your progesterone. And progesterone is like the happy balancing thing. Like for women, we want to preserve our progesterone for as long as we can. Like that is essentially going to help us not go through significant issues in menopause. That is going to help us to have healthy periods. It's going to help us to have healthy egg reserves. It's going to help us to fertilize our eggs better. Like pre- pre- progesterone is something we need to preserve. And the reason it's something we need to preserve is because there's so many ways to make estrogen, and there's only one way to make progesterone. But when you have high cortisol, you don't make a lot of progesterone because the same precursor that makes progesterone makes cortisol. And so because of that, you get this shunting, like essentially you bypass the making of progesterone and you only make cortisol. And that is where a lot of these like hormonal dysregulations, hormonal imbalances start to kind of sit. They start to live there. Um, so yeah, so that's the science. That's the science in a nutshell. Like very simply, I'm not including like all the things that track in my brain, but I am including the things that maybe like you would need to know to kind of understand the basics of this. Um, Beyond that, does anyone have any questions before I move on to like lifestyle and things like that? Can low cortisol or low progesterone caused by high cortisol be treated outside of HRT? So, yes, it's not necessarily that it needs to be treated, it's that the body needs to be brought back into balance. And when you bring the body back into balance, it has a tendency to go towards what it needs to do anyways. So, what you really just want to do is not confuse it. And that's where like the lifestyle things come in. That's where, a lot of what I talk about in my article that I wrote come in is like your body will make more progesterone as long as you decrease the cortisol and as long as you keep it down and regulated for extended periods of time. That shunting won't happen anymore naturally. You're welcome. Any other questions on that? I hope that answered your question. You can let me know if it didn't. Does anyone else have any more questions about what I just explained? It's so funny. I feel like I'm like teaching a science class, which I kind of love. I mean, I I feel like I'm one of the only people that I know that got into medicine because I genuinely just was obsessed with like learning about the body. Like I feel like when I was younger, I thought I wanted to work one-on-one with people, like, I thought I was like that. Oh, you're welcome. I hope it's helpful. I mean, please give me, like, the feedback. This will be posted afterwards, and you can write, like, what your reviews in it are. You can always send me a message. I actually do pick a lot of the topics for the month from my messages because people in the paid community can essentially send me like a question they have or like something they want me to write about, something they want me to talk about. And so that's how I pick these topics. And I did get a message where someone wanted me to like get into the ins and outs of cortisol because they were still confused. And I get it. I mean, it's a big topic. It's a lot. It's a lot going on. I have an article coming out next month on the thyroid, and that'll just like blow your mind because the thyroid is it's very, very interesting. Yes, paid community is just the paid subscription on Substack. It's either the paid subscription or it's the founding subscription. So you can do either one. The founding subscription, I have a thing going on right now where like the first 50 in there will get like a 15-minute health consultation with me. And then what's the other thing? Oh, you get the hormone reset course, which that was a course I built 2 years ago. I essentially just refine it every year with new information, but it's kinda like my starting course for everyone who has any sort of, like, hormone dysregulation. It's the protocol that I used, like, the protocol that I created to develop it, um, and that comes with the founding membership. And then the paid community, you can or the founding membership, you pay once, and I think you just get the content for essentially the rest of your life, like, you never have to pay again. So that's kinda cool because it's not, like, dependent, like, you can just essentially be here forever and not have to pay, like, a yearly subscription or whatever. And I do plan on keeping the apothecary forever. Like, I literally had a therapy session a couple of weeks ago, and my therapist was like, "Oh, like, like if you like, is this a stepping stone to something else? Or like, or is this it? And I was like, no, I got like actually really emotional about it because I was like, no, like this is it. Like I will probably always do many things because I'm just that type of person, but I never plan on closing or ending the apothecary. And that's actually what started me, like my brain started creating pretty much a logo like after that conversation because I was like, oh no, this is like set in stone. Like this is something that like I could see myself in my 60s, whether it's on Substack or not. Like that's the cool thing about Substack is, you know, I don't have to be on here to like communicate with my newsletter community. Like I have all of those emails that it like gives me all of those emails every month. So it's just cool because this can continue on for however long I'm willing to do it. And I'm telling you guys, I'm here for the long haul. Like I could see myself 60 with like really long, like silver curly hair, still talking about this stuff, like still explaining these things because it's just like I love it. Um and still writing because that is just, I mean, it's interesting because it's something that I've genuinely done since I was so young, and I never in my life thought that it would become, I mean, I guess maybe until I was 10, I thought that it would probably be a career of mine, but after I decided, like, doctor, I was like, "Nope, not a writer, I'm a doctor," like, left brain only, pretty much, and it's just so interesting to see because, like, you know, your parents kind of, like sometimes your parents just, like, know more than you. Like, I say sometimes because sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do, and, like, one of the things that my mom has always said, like, since I was very, very young was like, "You're gonna be a writer one day. Like, you're gonna be a writer one day," and I was just like, "No way," like, you know, for at least 20 years of my life, I was like, "Nope, not gonna be a writer." And then it's just so funny because you end up, like, being what you were doing when you were, like, 5 years old, you know? Like, you just it just, like, comes back around when the time is right. Yay, yes, please be here with me. That is the thing, like, I feel like so many of you have been here since, like, the beginning of it, which is just really cool. You've seen the transitions of it, you've seen how much I've grown, how much it's grown, like, I feel like the apothecary is me, I am the apothecary in a lot of ways, and, uh, just seeing, like, my own growth over these years has been, I mean, years, because like, yeah, like, I started this in, like, 2024, so okay. Love this conversation. Now understand why women look so different in a high stress relationship. Yes, that is why. This is so funny because I was talking about this with my friend recently. I was like, oh, like I just looked like so not well when I was like in that relationship where I was like so stressed. And yes, it is that. It's like this prolonged cortisol stuff really makes you uglier. Like, not to be, like, vain, but, like, I mean, all of us are vain to a certain extent, right? And, like, I would, like, go back and look at pictures of myself, and I would be like, you know, for most of my life, I've looked the same. It was around that period of time where, like, my relationship was so stressful and my career was so stressful that, like, I did not look like myself. And, like, maybe, you know, someone, I mean, maybe if it's not you, like, no one's really gonna notice because they see you every day. You're pretty much the same every day, right? But, like, when you go back and you look at yourself and you're like, "Who the fuck is that?" Like, "Who is this?" Like, I posted a picture of me really deep in it, like, from in the career edit recently, and I was like, "Oh my god, like, she does not look like how I look now at all." Like, if anything, I look now closer than to what I looked like before I did that whole thing, before I took that, like, little detour or whatever. Like, in terms of, like, the youth of my face, like, I felt like my face just got, like, really, like, slim, like, even though, like, my body wasn't necessarily slim, but my face was like, girls, just go back and look. Oh, gee, no, for real. Like, yeah, exactly, like, it's so crazy. And my friend was like, "Oh, like, Yeah, like, it really is true, like, you do get uglier, like, when you're unhappy in a relationship, like, you do get uglier, and, like, that's not to say that you're not beautiful, like, you are beautiful, obviously, but, like, I feel like there's a glow, like, there's a energy to someone who feels internally, like, joyous, I feel like, even if not every day is happy, right? Like, life is life, and it's important to recognize that life is gonna life. Like, we can't control that. We only have but so much control. But when you're internally just like so fucking stressed, like, yeah, it's not a pretty look. Like, I just remember myself in that time. And when I tell you, I would think myself into a headache. Like, I could literally, like, be completely fine, and then I would, like, get on one of these things that stress me out, and I would just be, like, gone, like, like, you could talk to me, I wouldn't even know you were talking to me because I was, like, so deep, like, in my head, um, which it's like I mean, there's so much to talk I feel like relationship stuff, like, I could talk about all day 'cause, uh, there's so much having to do with relationships and like career stuff that genuinely impacts your health. And I feel like if anyone gets anything from my presence on social media, it is that connection. Like, I feel like this is something that I got blessed with early on and like continued to just get blessed with. So, like, now it's like I'm just like a broken record about how much like your life is directly influencing your health. Directly. Like, just absolutely directly, you know, we can throw all the supplements, all the medications, all the freaking to-dos and how-to-dos and wellness things at it, and if you do not change whatever is going on in your life that is leading to this, you're just gonna be in the same place, and it's just gonna get worse, and you're just gonna develop more chronic things. So, like, I feel like I could preach that all day, but, let me not. That's not what this is about. This is about cortisol. Does anyone have any more questions? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Yes, yes, we are all in agreement. We've all been there, We all know, like, what it's like. I don't know, like and I specifically speak to women because, you know, we are so naturally sensitive that our direct response to the external world is just so much more heightened than men. And, like, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, we are intuitively more intuitive than men. And so it makes sense that our bodies and our health are genuinely more reflective of our external environment than men. Like, men reset every single day to the same exact pattern, right? It's rare for a man to have an autoimmune condition because of that. So, yeah, okay, that's why I feel so uncomfortable with the doctor. I don't always feel like I'm getting a whole situation, and that's true, like, that's real. I mean, as someone who I've been on both sides of it, right? I've been on the side of the doctor trying to explain something in a 15-minute period and also being constrained by what, like, Western medicine is. Like, I feel like there's such a different model for healing there than you see, like, you know, so much of my path actually was learning a lot of Eastern medicine stuff, like Ayurveda, acupuncture, Chinese traditional Chinese medicine, yogic philosophy. Like, literally, like, my 20s, like, early 20s were spent learning all of those things at the same time that I was in medical school. And so that is why my understanding of the body is definitely a lot different than you will hear from like a typical just Western medicine trained doctor. Like, I speak about it in a very holistic way. And that's why, when I talk about like my consultations, like, I didn't just name them consultations because they're not. Like, half the time when I'm someone comes in with, like, acne, we're not even really talking about the skin. Maybe we talk about the skin on, like, the 3rd session, but, like, what we're really doing is we're getting to the root of what is causing this skin thing, and you can't just, like, Band-Aid that. Like, you can't just, use this wash and, take spironolactone and it'll go away. Like, that's, like, the Western medicine model, and so, I don't necessarily identify with someone who, doesn't believe in Western medicine. Like, that's just not I don't identify with that. Like, I was in it long enough to know that this shit's important when it is. Um, but I do identify as someone who has a very open perspective, and, because of that open perspective and my ability to just, like, hold a lot of information in my brain, like, I'm informing everything that I learned in Western medicine with everything that I learned in Ayurveda, with everything that I learned in Chinese medicine world, with everything that I learned, working with Mexican curanderas in fucking Mexico. Like, it's all there in my brain, and so I think that that is definitely what has been reflected back to me in these consultations specifically is, like, you're not just getting you're not just getting, like, what a doctor would tell you. Like, you're getting really the full picture. Like, I'm also a biochemist, like, so, like, there's just so much information in my brain, and I like to give all of those different multiple perspectives to help people out. 'Cause you're not gonna really get that anywhere else is what I realized. Like, I feel like I am such a conundrum, and I've felt that way my whole life, and I feel like my whole life I kind of felt, like, shame for that, I think. Like, at the essence of all of us, we wanna belong, but as I got older, like, I realized how unique and important it was that I am the way that I am. Whereas, like, going through medical school, I felt like a psychopath because I was like, "You guys are, like, going to, like, I don't know, intern with, this cardiac surgeon, and, like, I'm gonna go live in Mexico for 4 months and, like, study spirit healing with this curandera." And, yeah, that just was me, and, like, for